My grandson came up from the basement, pale and shaky. "Grandpa, pack a bag. We're leaving. Don't call anyone." I was confused. "What's wrong? Please, just trust me." 20 minutes later, my children were calling nonstop. "Don't answer them!"
My name is Daniel Walker. I'm 63 years old. I coached Little League for 11 years. I made a pot roast that once reduced a grown man to tears. And until 8 months ago, I believed, genuinely, completely believed, that I knew exactly who I was and where I came from. But right now, I don't know whether to laugh or set something on fire. Welcome back to Dad's Sweet Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, every villain in these stories thought they were the smartest person in the room. They were not. Subscribe so you never miss a story. It started on a Saturday in October, the kind of gray, nothing-to-do day where you end up reorganizing the spice rack just to feel productive. My grandson Ryan was visiting for the weekend. He's 19, sharp as a tack, the kind of kid who fixes your Wi-Fi without being asked and then judges you silently for still having Internet Explorer on your desktop. He'd asked to poke around the basement, said he wanted to find my old baseball card collection for a school project on Americana. "Sure," I said. "Knock yourself out. There's nothing down there but dust and my dignity from 1987. I was upstairs watching football. Rebecca, my wife of 40 years, the woman who has seen me cry at exactly 2 movies and will take the titles to her grave, was visiting her sister Olivia for the afternoon. I had chips. I had a blanket. I had 0 concerns. I didn't know it yet, but the next 20 minutes were going to rewrite everything. Ryan had been down there maybe half an hour when I heard him go quiet. Not the normal quiet of a kid focused on something. The wrong kind of quiet. The kind that comes right before bad news. I'd heard it before, actually. Same silence, right before my doctor said the words, "We need to do a biopsy." Your body knows the difference. His footsteps came up the stairs slowly, one at a time, like he was rehearsing something in his head. He appeared in the doorway, pale, not sick pale, sheet white in the face the way people look when they've seen something they can't unsee. He was holding a shoebox, old, taped shut with masking tape gone yellow with age. His hands weren't exactly steady. "Grandpa," he said. "Yeah, bud. Who am I to you?" I muted the game. What kind of question is that? Just answer it. Who am I? You're Ryan. You're my grandson. You're Mitchell and Lauren's kid. What's going on? He set the shoebox on the coffee table and sat down across from me. Didn't say anything for a long moment. Just looked at me with those eyes that were suddenly too serious for a 19-year-old's face. "Is Mitchell really your son?" he asked. The room changed temperature. I don't know how else to describe it. "Ryan, because there's stuff in this box, Grandpa. Letters, documents. And I need you to look at them before anyone else does because I think—" He stopped, swallowed. "I think someone's been lying to you for a really long time. ... Here's what was in the box. Letters. 22 of them, bound with a rubber band that crumbled when Ryan touched it. Letters addressed to my wife Rebecca, but not from me. From a man named Harrison Colt, dated between 1981 and 1986. The handwriting was confident, forward-leaning, the kind of handwriting that belongs to a man who's never been uncertain about anything in his life. There were also 2 documents. One was a private paternity test, the old-fashioned kind. The kind you'd have done quietly, off the books, before the internet made secrets harder to keep. It was dated June 1984. Mitchell's name was on it. So was Harrison Colt's. The result was not ambiguous. The second document was even better. It was a letter from Harrison to Rebecca, dated 1986. In it, he referenced our arrangement and the money. He mentioned that Rebecca had agreed to maintain the current situation, as long as he kept funding, and I'm quoting here, the life she'd chosen to keep. My wife, my Rebecca, who cried at our anniversary dinner every single year, who held my hand when my father died, who once told me, looking me dead in the eye, that I was the only man she had ever loved. I sat there with those letters in my hands and I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a kid. The specific disorienting vertigo of realizing that a thing you believed was solid is actually hollow. "Grandpa," Ryan's voice was very careful. "Are you okay?" "No," I said, because there was no point lying. "No, I'm really not. Do you want me to? Just sit with me for a minute." He sat. Good kid. Didn't say a word. Just sat there while his grandfather tried to reassemble 40 years of memories, with the knowledge that some of them were built on sand. What I didn't know yet was that the box was only the beginning. The real story, the one with teeth, Hadn't started yet. Time Mitchell is my oldest. 38 years old. Contractor. Lives 20 minutes away. We go fishing twice a year. He calls me on my birthday without fail. He has my build, I always thought. Broad shoulders, a little too stubborn for his own good. Now I was looking at those shoulders in my memory and wondering if I'd invented that resemblance out of love. My other two kids are Chloe, 34, and my youngest, who I'd always just called my boy, but who's actually named after nobody I can remember naming. His name is actually just plain James, 30. Plain, uncomplicated James who lives in Portland and calls me when he's bored. Neither of them are in this story yet, but they would be. I put the letters back in the box. I looked at Ryan. Does your dad know? I asked. I don't think so, Ryan said. He doesn't act like someone who knows. That was probably the truest thing anyone said to me that entire day. Mitchell doesn't have a poker face. Never did. When he's carrying something heavy, you know it within 5 minutes of being in the same room as him. If he'd known he wasn't my biological son, I'd have seen it in his eyes every time he looked at me, which meant Rebecca had carried this alone. For 40 years. And Harrison Colt had carried it with her. Do you know who Harrison Colt is? I asked Ryan. He pulled his phone out slowly, turned it to face me. I looked him up while I was still in the basement. The screen showed a LinkedIn profile. Harrison Colt, 67. Managing partner at Colt & Associates, a real estate development firm based out of our city. Gray-templed, well-dressed, the kind of man who gets photographed at charity galas and looks like he belongs there. He had the kind of jaw that goes with old money and zero accountability. And there it was, in the work history section, barely notable, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. 1979 to 1985. Hargrove & Sons Building Contractors. The same company where Rebecca used to work as an office manager, before she met me, before she gave it up to start a family, which is what she always said with a smile that I now wanted to put in a blender. He still lives here, Ryan said quietly. I know, I said, though I hadn't known, until that second. What are you going to do? I looked at my grandson, this 19-year-old kid who had come up from my basement and handed me a grenade with the pin already out, and I said the most honest thing I could think of. I'm going to make some calls, and then I'm going to wait. And 10. Rebecca came home at 6. I had dinner on the stove. Ryan was in the guest room with the door closed, bless him, playing video games at a volume that suggested he understood the need to be elsewhere. She walked in looking exactly the way she always looked. A little tired, a little happy, hair slightly windswept from the drive. She kissed me on the cheek. She smelled like Olivia's lavender candles. She asked if the pot roast was almost ready. Sit down, Rebecca, I said. Something in my voice must have done it, because she went still immediately. 20 years ago she would have asked what was wrong. Instead she just went still, like she'd been waiting for this, like some part of her had always known this day was circling. Daniel, sit down. She sat. I put the shoebox on the table between us. I watched her face. Oh, she knew what it was. The color drained out of her so fast it was almost cinematic. Her hand came up to her mouth. She didn't say anything for a full 30 seconds. And in those 30 seconds I watched 40 years of marriage reorganize itself behind her eyes into something I didn't fully recognize. Where did you... Basement. Ryan found it. Oh God. Yeah. Daniel, Is Mitchell my son? The longest pause of my life. Longer than waiting for biopsy results. Longer than the moment before a car crash when you know it's coming and your brain just freezes. Biologically, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. No. There it was. Out loud. Real. I nodded. I turned back to the stove. I stirred the pot roast because I needed something to do with my hands that wasn't flipping the table. How long did you know? I asked. Since the pregnancy. And Harrison. He knew too. It was before you and I were serious, Daniel. It was before the paternity test is from 1984, I said. We were married in 1982. Silence. So it wasn't before, I said. Try again, she cried. Of course she cried. Rebecca has always been a beautiful crier. Not ugly cry, not dramatic cry, just quiet, elegant tears that make you want to wrap her up and fix whatever's wrong. I had spent 40 years responding to those tears. My body still wanted to reach across and hold her hand. I did not hold her hand. We had an affair, she said. It was 8 months. It ended before Mitchell was born. Harrison. He wanted me to leave you. I didn't. I chose you, Daniel. I chose our family. You chose our family. You were so good with him. You loved him so much from the start, I thought. You thought what? That it didn't matter? That I didn't deserve to know? I thought the truth would destroy everything. Rebecca. I turned around and looked at her. The lie already did. I didn't know yet what Harrison Colt had been doing while this conversation was happening. But I was about to find out. And it was going to make everything so much worse and so much more satisfying than I could have imagined. And I'll skip the part where I cried in the shower. A man's allowed at least one scene of private devastation before he pulls himself together. All you need to know is that it happened. It was brief. And when I came out, I was a different version of myself. A colder one. The kind that makes lists. Over the next 3 weeks, I made a lot of lists. I did not tell Mitchell. Not yet. That conversation required more preparation than a weekend could give me. And it wasn't mine alone to have. I asked Rebecca to stay in the house, to keep things normal on the surface, while I figured out my next move. She agreed. Desperately, pathetically agreed. Like a woman who would agree to anything to keep the structure standing. I'm not proud of how little sympathy I had for her in those weeks. I am, however, proud of what I built in the meantime. See, the letters in that box weren't just personal. That second letter, the one about the arrangement and the money, was something else entirely. Because when Rebecca said Harrison had been funding the life she'd chosen to keep, she hadn't been vague about it in the letter. She had itemized it. He had been making payments to her, monthly, for over 2 years, starting in 1984, the year Mitchell was born, and ending in 1986, when something apparently shifted. The payments came through a business account belonging to a shell company. I know what that sounds like to you. It sounds like hush money. It sounded that way to me too. But here's the thing about Harrison Colt. Managing partner, charity gala regular, pillar of the community. He was also currently in the middle of a very public campaign to become the city's next district council chairman. His whole platform was about family values, community integrity, and, I want you to savor this, transparency and leadership. I am not a vindictive person by nature. Ask anyone who knows me. I coach kids. I make pot roast I once let a guy merge in traffic during rush hour, and I still think about it fondly. But I am, when necessary, a thorough one. I called my old college friend Lily Reese, a woman who has been a paralegal for 30 years and owes me a favor I never planned to collect. Until now. You still have contacts at the county records office? I asked. Daniel Walker, she said. What did someone do to you? Pull the property and financial filings for Colton Associates between 1983 and 1988, and anything connected to a shell called, I checked the letter, Meridian Property Group. A pause. This is personal, isn't it? Very. Give me a week. She needed 4 days. What Lily found was this. Harrison Colt had not simply been paying my wife to keep quiet about an affair. The payments from Meridian Property Group were part of a larger pattern of transactions that in 1984 were connected to a housing development deal in which Harrison had used falsified occupancy permits to push through construction approvals. The scheme had touched 4 city officials and netted his firm about $2.3 million in contracts that should have gone to competitive bid. 2 of those city officials were still alive. One of them, a now retired man named Garland Mitchell, no relation to my son, had apparently been trying for years to find documentation to support what he knew had happened. He'd been stonewalled every time. The records had a way of going missing, except for the records that had been in my basement, because tucked beneath the letters in a manila envelope I had initially set aside were copies, account statements, transfer records, correspondence between Harrison and the officials. Rebecca, it turned out, had kept everything. Whether as insurance or guilt or both, I couldn't tell you. Maybe she didn't know herself, but she had kept every single piece of it in that shoebox, in my basement, for 40 years. My wife, who had lied to me about the most fundamental thing in our life together, had apparently also been accidentally holding the key to dismantling a corrupt man's entire legacy. Life is funny, not ha-ha funny. The other kind. I sat with Lily Reese at her kitchen table and looked at the documents spread out between us, and I said, "Is this enough?" "For what?" she asked. "For everything." She took her glasses off and cleaned them, the way she always does when she's thinking hard. "Daniel, if you take this to the right people, yes, this is enough to end his campaign. Depending on how the statute of limitations runs on some of this, it could be enough for a serious civil suit from the city. And if Garland Mitchell is willing to go on record—" "Let me worry about Garland Mitchell," I said. What I hadn't counted on was Harrison Colt finding out that the shoebox had been discovered before I was ready to move. And what happened next almost derailed everything. And he showed up at my house 3 weeks after Ryan found the box. On a Tuesday afternoon, a silver Mercedes pulled up to my curb, and a tall, gray-templed man in a coat that cost more than my first car walked up my front path like he owned the street. I watched him through the window. 67 years old, and he still walked like a man who expected doors to open for him. I'll give him this. He had posture. You could hate the man and still admire the posture. I opened the door before he knocked. He blinked, recovered quickly. Daniel Walker? In the flesh. You must be Harrison. A pause. He reassessed me. I let him. Can we talk? He said. Come in. I offered him coffee. He declined. We sat in the living room, the same room where Ryan had handed me the shoebox, the same room where I'd watched my wife's face tell the truth her mouth had withheld for 4 decades. And Harrison Colt crossed one leg over the other and looked at me with the steady, practiced calm of a man who had navigated difficult conversations many times before. Rebecca called me, he said. I figured. She told me you found some old correspondence. Old correspondence, I repeated. That's one way to put it. Daniel, I understand you're angry. Do you? I leaned back in my chair. Because I want to make sure we're calibrated here, Harrison. I'm not angry the way you get angry when someone cuts you off in traffic. I'm angry the way you get angry when you find out 40 years of your life were built on a lie. Those are different feelings. One of them goes away. The other one you have to find a use for. He was quiet for a moment. Then, almost admiringly, what is it you want? I want to know if Mitchell knows. He doesn't. Good. Then we agree on one thing. I stood up. Now get out of my house. Daniel. He stood too, and now his voice dropped, lost a little of the polish. There are documents in that box that go beyond the personal. If those documents were to surface during my campaign, I know. Then you understand there would be consequences for Rebecca as well. Her name is in those letters. Her accounts received those transfers. If someone decided to make an issue of it, and there it was. The threat dressed up as concern. I looked at him for a long moment, at this tall, polished, silver-haired man who had slept with my wife, fathered my son, paid her to stay quiet about both, and was now standing in my living room suggesting that he could hurt her if I wasn't cooperative. Harrison, I said pleasantly, I want you to hear me very clearly. Get out of my house, don't contact Rebecca again, and never set foot on my property. Because if you do any of those things, what I have in that box will be on the desk of the city editor at the Tribune before you make it back to your Mercedes. He stared at me. I'll see myself out, he said. You sure will, I said. I watched him drive away. Then I picked up the phone and called Lily Reese and told her to accelerate everything by 2 weeks. If you've made it this far, first of all, thank you. You're officially one of the good ones. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from. We genuinely love knowing. And if you enjoyed this, a like, share, and subscribe costs you nothing but means everything to us. I told Mitchell on a Sunday. Rebecca was there. Ryan was there. Because he'd earned the right to be, and because Mitchell's own son deserved to see his grandfather handle something hard with his chest out. It was the worst conversation of my life. Worse than anything in the Harrison saga. Worse than Rebecca's confession. Worse than all of it. Because Mitchell, my son, my firstborn, the kid I taught to ride a bike and talked to all night when his first marriage fell apart, Mitchell looked at me when I was done talking and said, the one thing I hadn't prepared for. Are you still my dad? Not, who is my real father? Not, how could Mom do this? Just, are you still my dad? I had to take a second. I will not apologize for that. You were mine the day you were born, I said. You're mine right now. You'll be mine when I'm in the ground. Biology is just chemistry, Mitchell. What we have is a choice I make every single day. You understand me? He nodded. He cried. I cried, Ryan cried, and then immediately looked embarrassed about it, which made Mitchell laugh, which broke the tension in the room like a window going out. Rebecca tried to speak. Mitchell held up a hand. Not today, Mom, he said quietly. I can't do you today. She nodded. She accepted that. It was, honestly, the most dignified I'd seen her since all of this started. I didn't know it yet. But Mitchell was going to have his own role in the ending, and it was going to be perfect. I'm going to tell you how it ended. But first I want to tell you something about revenge, because everyone gets this wrong. Revenge isn't heat. It isn't the moment when you're shaking with fury and you want to scream and throw things. That's grief. That's pain. That's the first hour after you find the shoebox. Revenge, done right, is cold. It is patient. It is a Sunday morning in November when you wake up early, drink your coffee slowly, and review your documentation one final time with the steady hands of a man who has already decided exactly what he's going to do and is simply waiting for the right moment to do it. Harrison Colt's campaign fundraiser was a black tie event at the Meridian Hotel. And yes, I noticed the name on a Friday evening in November. 400 guests, city officials, business community, journalists. The kind of event where a man reveals himself to be exactly what he wants you to think he is. I did not attend the fundraiser. I am 63 with a bad knee and I don't own a tuxedo. What I did was send a package, delivered by courier at 4 p.m. that Friday, 2 hours before the event, to the city desk of the Tribune, the offices of the County Ethics Board, and the personal email of Garland Mitchell, who had waited 38 years for someone to hand him what I was handing him, and who, when I'd called him 3 weeks prior, had started crying within 4 minutes of me introducing myself. The package contained copies of everything: the financial records, the transfer documents, the correspondence between Harrison and the city officials. Lily Rice had organized it into a 60-page brief that was as clean and damning as anything I'd ever seen outside of a movie. It also contained a cover letter, 1 page, written by me at my kitchen table on a Thursday night while Rebecca sat quietly in the other room and Ryan played video games upstairs and my pot roast simmered on the stove. It laid out the timeline clearly, identified the source of the documents, and noted, with the dry pleasantness I have apparently perfected, that the enclosed materials had been preserved privately for 4 decades and were now being released in the public interest. I signed it Daniel Walker, Citizen. The Tribune ran the story the next morning. Saturday edition, above the fold. Harrison Colt's campaign events for the following week were canceled by end of day Saturday. By Monday, the County Ethics Board had opened a formal inquiry. By Wednesday, 2 of Harrison's former associates, old men now, both of them with more to lose than to gain by staying quiet, had retained lawyers and were, according to Chloe's contacts, talking. Harrison Colt withdrew from the council race on a Thursday. His statement cited personal and health considerations. I read it over breakfast. It was impressively vague. I gave him points for that, because at 67 with your legacy on fire, health considerations is about the most graceful way out you've got. But that's not the ending. That's just the main course. The ending happened 3 weeks later when Colt and Associates lost 2 major city contracts that had been up for renewal. Contracts that, according to Chloe, the city had been quietly renewing for 15 years, out of a combination of inertia and the kind of mutual back-scratching that keeps men like Harrison Colt in their Mercedes. The value of those contracts was approximately $4.8 million annually. The company that won those contracts instead? A small but well-regarded construction firm that had been submitting competitive bids for years without success. Walker & Son Contracting. Mitchell's company. I want to be clear, I did not engineer that. I did not call anyone or pull any strings or make any suggestions. Mitchell had been submitting bids on those contracts for 3 years. He was the legitimate low bidder both times. The city, freshly mortified by its association with Harrison Colt and desperate to demonstrate some kind of clean break, went with the honest bid. Life, sometimes, will do your poetic justice for you if you're patient enough. Mitchell called me when he found out. I was in the garage of all places cleaning out what was left of the junk in the basement. Because once you've found one shoebox full of 40-year-old dynamite, you develop a strong desire to know what else is down there. Dad, he said, and his voice was the voice of a man who had been through a furnace and come out the other side with something clarified. Did you know? About the contracts? No, I believe you, he said. I just needed to hear you say it. How do you feel? I asked. A long breath. Weird. Good. Angry at Mom still. Better at you than I've been in a while. That's fair on all counts. Hey, Dad. Yeah. The first project I do with those contracts, he said. I'm naming it the Walker Building. I don't care if it's a sewage treatment facility. I laughed for the first time in 2 months. Real laughter. The kind that comes from somewhere below the throat. It better not be a sewage treatment facility, I said. There are things I haven't resolved. I want to be honest about that, because this isn't a movie and I'm not a screenwriter. Rebecca and I are separated, not divorced, not yet, because 40 years of anything doesn't dismantle in a season. And because there are lawyers and paperwork, and the kind of careful, exhausting conversations that require two adults who are both devastated in different ways to sit across from each other and be reasonable. We're working on it. Some days working on it means actual progress. Some days it means I drive to the lake and sit in my truck for an hour before going back. Mitchell is in therapy, his choice, his timeline. He told me it was helping. I told him I was glad. We don't talk about Harrison Colt. We talk about fishing and his contracts and Ryan's semester grades and whether the pot roast is better with or without the red wine reduction. It is unambiguously better with the red wine reduction. This is not up for debate. Ryan, my grandson, the 19-year-old who came up from my basement pale and steady and handed me a grenade with the kindness of someone who understood what it would cost. Ryan got a job offer from a tech firm in Austin and asked me if he should take it. I told him yes. I told him to go live his life with both hands. I told him that the greatest thing a person can do with a hard truth is use it to build something better, not just to burn something down. He wrote that down. I don't know why, but he wrote it down. Harrison Colt still lives in this city. I see his name occasionally. A mention in a business brief, a signature on a letter to the editor that was, I noticed, about civic transparency. I don't know if that's irony or penance or both. I don't particularly care. A man stripped of his power and his reputation and his carefully constructed mythology is already living the consequence. I don't need to watch. What I need is in my kitchen. It is a pot roast. It is a phone call from my son about a new contract. It is a text from Ryan that says nothing but a thumbs up emoji, which is 19-year-old for I'm thinking of you. It is the quiet understanding that I have been, in the ways that matter, in all the ways that actually build a life, exactly who I thought I was. Husband, father, grandfather, citizen, the man who found the shoebox, the man who knew what to do with it. 40 years of marriage, 3 kids, 1 mortgage paid off, and a knee that predicts rain. That was my whole life in a sentence. Turns out, when you rewrite a sentence, sometimes what you get is a better one. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories.